Hi boys and girls, welcome to the first PowerPoint presentation of Chapter 4, which is called An Epic Journey. And this PowerPoint presentation of course starts with paragraph 4.1, how it all began. These are the keywords you have to study. These are the English keywords on the left, and on the right you can see the Dutch translations. Now these are the learning objectives. There are 3 of them. The first one is that you can describe who Charles Darwin was and how he came up with the idea of evolution. Second one is that you can describe what evolution actually is. And third one is that you can describe the 3 principles of evolution. Now, evolution, in short, is the process wherein species arise, change, and or disappear. A classic example is the giraffe, for example. Here on the right, you can see 2 giraffes. The left one is eating leaves from a bush, and the right one is trying to eat leaves that hang from a tree. Now, at a certain moment, it might happen that they eat all the leaves that are present. So the leaves of the bush are all eaten, and the leaves of the tree are also all eaten, at least the ones that the giraffe can reach. But if you have a longer neck, which you can see on the second page, you get more food, because the one with the longer neck can reach out to higher leaves, which enables the giraffe to eat more leaves than a giraffe that cannot reach them. Now, of course, a giraffe with a long neck can still eat the leaves from a bush, but along with the giraffe with a short neck cannot eat the leaves that hang high up in a tree. So, the giraffe with a longer neck has more food available, which gives him more energy. He will live longer and produce more offspring. Now, the longer neck is a trait which can be passed on to his offspring. So, imagine this giraffe with a long neck having 10 baby giraffes. Certainly, one of them has the longest neck of those 10. And one of them will have the shortest neck. Now, the one with the longer neck will have an advantage over the one with shorter necks. So, that one is also, again, able to get more food, reproduce more, produce more offspring, and pass on his trait to his children. And by doing so, over a period of thousands or millions of years, the neck will slowly, gradually become longer and longer. And the giraffes with a shorter neck, they will die out. So what remains is a giraffe with a long neck, because the giraffe with a long neck is best adapted to the conditions in his environment. Now, the whole idea of evolution was created by Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was an Englishman who was born in 1809, and he died in 1882. And at a young boy, he studied medicine. But he didn't like his study very much. He particularly disliked cutting in people, so he dropped out. He dropped out of medicine school, and then his father sent him to a school to become a priest or a clergyman. Now, Darwin didn't do so well there either, but what he did do really well was describing nature. For his hobby, he was a naturalist. and a naturalist is someone who describes nature. Back in the 19th century, a lot of species in nature were unknown or undescribed. And there were a lot of people whose job or whose hobby was to describe and document that nature, give species their name, and describe what they eat and where they live and so on. And Darwin was a hobby naturalist. And as a science student and a naturalist, he was asked to join the HMS Beagle, a ship that set sail in 1831 for a 5-year expedition around the world to describe the world that was not commonly known yet. So they went to South America and to Africa and to Southeast Asia. And Darwin described nature in all those different areas. And with what he saw during his trip, he created the theory of evolution. Now, this is a painting of Darwin in his younger years. And this is the middle ship is the HMS Beagle that had set sail in 1831. Now this is the Beagle's journey. They left from Plymouth in 1831, and at a certain point, as you can see on the left side of the map, they reached the Galapagos Islands. And the Galapagos Islands, that was really an important place for Darwin's theory, as you will learn later. Now what Darwin did, he collected different animals, different plants, but he also collected stones. And he discovered fossils. And what was really special is that on tops of mountains, for example in the Andes in South America, he found fossils of shells on top of mountains, which meant that there had to be an ocean at a certain moment in history on top of that mountain. So the world changes, and the fossils were really important to supporting Darwin's theory of species that change over long periods of time and go extinct. Now here are the Galapagos Islands, and Darwin did some really special discoveries there. For example, by looking at certain animals like tortoises or certain birds called finches, he was able to look at the animals and tell which island they came from. The saddleback tortoise had the same ancestor, but at a certain moment they settled on different islands with different types of food available. And over long periods of time, they adapted to the conditions, to the food that was available. And by doing this, after a long period of time, you are able to tell where the tortoises came from. So they had the same ancestor. The ancestor produced offspring, and the offspring gradually adapted to the conditions that are present on the different islands. Now, an ancestor in Dutch is een voorouder, and offspring, as you already know, dat zijn nakomelingen. This is quite important. Now, back to evolution. So evolution is the process wherein species arise, change, and or disappear. We have seen how giraffes can change, and we have seen how tortoises can change. New species, they can arise, and species can disappear. Think of the extinction of dinosaurs, for example. Yeah, so this is one example, the giraffe that has developed from a certain ancestor. Now, there are three principles of evolution. One is variation, that each individual is different. The second one is natural selection. Natural selection means that the individuals that are the best adapted to their environment survive and produce offspring. And the third one is isolation. And when individuals get isolated, this may result in development of different species. I will show you what this is in a later slide. Now, I will talk you through all three principles. The first one is variation. You all know what hereditary material is, which is in your DNA. And because of mutations, which are changes in your DNA, or because of sexual reproduction, new combinations of DNA or hereditary materials are made. Now here you can see three kittens, for example. They don't exactly look the same. You can also look at your brother or sister. You don't exactly look the same as well. And the same goes for ducklings, as you can see on the right here. Now this is a mother duck with 3, 4, 5, 6 baby ducklings. And as you can see, 3 of them are yellow and 3 of them are blackish, yellowish, brownish colored. Now, some of these ducklings, they need to die. It might be hard to say, but they need to die. Because if all baby ducks, or if all ducklings that are born each year will grow up to become adults, you will have a serious problem of having too many ducks in your country at a certain moment. So it is quite important that only the strongest ones survive and become adults and produce new babies. This is what we call survival of the fittest. Now, the fittest means not per se the strongest, but it means the one that has the best fit. That means the one that has the best adaptations to the conditions of his or her environment. This is what we call natural selection. Now, natural selection is that organisms better suited to the conditions in the environment have the best chances of survival. So again, this is called survival of the fittest. Now here you can see 2 species with a common ancestor. So maybe millions of years ago there was one type of fox or a fox-like animal. It spread the earth. Some of them came to live in Arctic areas, like the right one, and some of them came to live in desert areas, like the left one. Now the conditions are quite different. In deserts it's hot and dry, and in Arctic areas it is very cold and also dry. Now, for the foxes that live in a desert, it can be a problem to get overheated. So you want to lose as much heat as you can. Now this fox does so by cooling his blood that runs through his ears. So if you have bigger ears, you have an advantage to the foxes that do not have big ears. Now if you have an advantage, you probably survive longer, produce offspring, and pass on that trait to your offspring. Now on the right, you can see a fox with a thick fur coat and small ears. Because the blood that runs through his ears remains close to the head, doesn't lose a lot of heat, and makes sure that the fox is kept warm or doesn't lose too much warmth. Because if this fox can contain his heat, it will give him an advantage to the foxes that can't. He will survive longer, produce more offspring, and pass on that trait to his or her children. And by doing this over long periods of time, new species arise. Now, it is quite important for new species to arise that they cannot reproduce with each other anymore. So therefore, isolation is needed. Now, isolation is explained here with a example of beetles. Now, on the top left, you can see a population of beetles. Now, there are different beetles there, and at a certain moment, there is a river that runs over an area of land, and the population gets split into two groups. Now, they cannot fly or swim over the river; it's too wide and it's flowing way too fast. So the beetles, which are still the same species, are still completely separated. Now, at a certain moment, the conditions change. As you can see in the top right, a wet area develops, and on the other side, a dry area develops. And due to sexual reproduction and mutations, variation takes place. And on the left, the ones better suited to a wet environment survive and reproduce. And on the right, the ones better adapted to a dry environment survive and reproduce. And over long periods of time, these two populations, they change and adapt to the conditions that are present. Now, if after 1,000 years or so, or 20,000 years, the river dries up again, the beetles are not able to interbreed anymore. There are too many differences in their body plans. Here you can see by color, for example. So they cannot reproduce anymore, which means that they are two separate species. Now, it is quite important to understand that this takes a long period of time. So it doesn't, you cannot see it, but it is there. And the isolation really is needed. Now, this is an example that can be found in your book. The peppered moth. The peppered moth is a butterfly which is white with a little bit specks. And it lives on birch trees. Now, on birch trees, it is camouflaged. You can see it on the left picture here. And birch tree is white. And for predators, such as birds, it is quite hard to see the white butterfly. But sometimes a black butterfly is born because of mutations in the DNA. Now, as you can see, it is really easy to spot the black butterfly on a white tree, and you can imagine that if a bird is going to eat a butterfly, he will spot the black one first and eat the black one. Now, in the 1900s, there was a industrial revolution, and a lot of trees were covered with a layer of black soot because of the pollution. Now, the black peppered moths had an advantage then over the white peppered moths. As you can see, the white moth is clearly more visible than the black one. Now, if a bird now comes to eat one of those moths, he will certainly take the white one. And in a couple of years, the population had shifted from 99% white over 1% black to 99% black over 1% white. Now, as during the 20th century pollution, we had less and less pollution in that form, And now you can see a lot of white-peppered moths again in Britain. So there you have it. Evolution through 3 principles. And well, this is the base of evolution, and practically the principle of how all life on Earth has came to be. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Good luck studying, and I'll see you next time.